Hello, this is Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity, and this is your weekly update. It is Friday, August 4th, 2017, and I guess I would have to title this one, Delusional Becomes Insane. One definition of insanity is that you keep trying the same things over and over again, hoping for a different result. There's another form of insanity, which is when you ignore the completely obvious things that are happening all around you. Now, I happen to be up in Maine at this point in time. I'm on an island called Little Got. Been coming here for 30 years. So I have my own baseline of what I can understand about the ecology up here. I can also read accounts of what it used to be like up here. Let me tell you what I'm seeing this year. And again, this is a story of what I'm not seeing. There are no terns. They make a chattering noise when they're flying around diving for fish. The seagull population is probably 10% of what it used to be. The snails are all gone. The crabs are all gone. There's a thriving lobster fishery here, but a fishery in the same way that a feedlot in Omaha is a wild place for cows to gather. What they do here is they gather bait fish from way out in the ocean, and they put them down in traps, and then they release the females, and they keep the males after they get past a certain size, throwing the same ones over and over again. These lobsters just crawl right back in the traps because that's where all the food is for them to eat. So that's what we have going on up here. But meanwhile, if I talk to the locals, I'm like, where are the sea urchins? There's none left up here. It used to be everywhere. You'd have to watch your feet. Where are the sand dollars? Where are the flatfish? Where are the mackerel? Where are the periwinkles? All of these different life forms. And every time the locals will say, oh, it's natural cycles. That's one way to interpret this, right? We also drove all the way up here. Again, no bugs on the windshield coming all the way from Massachusetts, 6-hour drive up through Maine. A rural place. Where'd the bugs go? So the feeling I get here is of life ebbing. The fingers are just pulling back in. Meanwhile, all that my culture can think to do in response to this is see if we can jam the stock market a little higher. And the central banks have gone on the most incredible printing spree ever in this last sort of really desperate attempt to just make everything seem okay. If we could just get stocks higher, people will feel better. If they feel better, they'll borrow more. If they borrow more, they'll spend more. If they spend more, they'll buy more. And meanwhile, we look out at the natural world and we can say, this story is insane. We have to come up with a new story. Meanwhile, you can look at the level of delusion and insanity that's just really, in my culture of the United States, really coming on strong. Look, there's been zero evidence presented so far that Russia did anything in particular about the elections, but there certainly hasn't been any trial. There hasn't been any proof offered. There's been innuendo. There's been all kinds of things that have said maybe this, maybe that, but no proof. What kind of a country out of 535 senators and congressmen, when they decide to vote on sanctions against Russia, lumping Russia in with North Korea in this particular story, where out of 535, only 5 total, 2 in the Senate, 3 in the House, said, I'm going to vote against those sanctions. Well, how did Russia receive that? They said, wow, this is a full-on trade war. They've expelled a bunch of our diplomats. Everything's heating up, but in the U.S. stock market, all that really matters is that we can get the price for Facebook or Netflix or Tesla or Google or Microsoft to go a little higher for a little longer. If you look at the charts, it is pure insanity what we're doing because we're thinking this time it'll be different. I know we blew up this huge tech bubble in the 90s that destroyed all sorts of people's retirement hopes in the year 2000. And then we did the whole thing with housing again in 2007. But this time is different. That's insane. But even if we were successful, even if this time is different, even if this time we can get stock markets to go up and get people growing and buying like crazy again, we have to ask what for? What for, particularly if you go out into the natural world, an entire ocean ecology has now been destroyed by humans pulling too much out of it, telling themselves it's natural cycles. It's not natural cycles. Yes, things come and go, but things don't just go and disappear, not across all sorts of species. This is insanity. And this fills me, as I've mentioned before, with my own personal sense of grief. When I look out and I do not see the cormorants all sitting on the point, when I do not hear the terns diving for fish, when I look in the water and I can see nothing living in there, nothing. It's like a bathtub. And we're convincing ourselves on some level that this is all perfectly normal and natural, but it's not. So, here's what we need to do. We need to begin understanding where we really are in this story. That's why we have just these incredible interviews up at Peak Prosperity. I just interviewed, this will be fun, a world-famous economist who, of a certain age, he's an elderly gentleman now at this point, but I asked him about this issue of infinite growth on a finite planet. You'll love the answer when you get there because it just really speaks to this delusional idea. His answer, to paraphrase, was, well, we haven't run out so far. People keep saying we're going to run out, and since it hasn't happened, I don't see why we should worry about it. Of course, all you have to do is come with me, and I can show you in my short lifetime all the changes that are happening ecologically. And the delusion in this story would be to believe that we humans can live without nature, that we can just manufacture food out of something and put it in stores and we'll all be okay. It's just completely out of touch with what I know to be true, which is that when we connect with the outside, when we connect with nature, our lives are more fulfilled, we are happier, our whole DNA is programmed for this sort of an environment. Everything else is an illusion or a delusion. So that's where we are. This is really delusional. When this all breaks, when these markets finally give way, this is for all the marbles because this is the everything bubble we're in. Stocks, how about this? Junk bonds in Europe just hit 2.43% this morning. 2.43% for junk bonds. It's insane. And this is where we are. So if you get your information from the news, if you get it from the prices, if you think both of those are giving you accurate information, you will make the wrong choices in this story. And by the way, the choices of that story are around death and destruction. There really is almost like we're being ruled by a death cult. As long as it can destroy everything, that seems to be what it wants to do. But we can choose to live lives of purpose, of meaning, of happiness, but you have to understand where we are in the story. And for that, you got to open your eyes and you have to be willing to look at the hard stuff, which is both what's there's still beauty everywhere, and there's things missing in this story, and they're missing more and more and more. So that's the story we've got going on. Please come by, Peak Prosperity. Hey, continue the conversation. Yes, we'll look at the hard stuff, but we'll also understand how we can remove ourselves from that story and start writing our own story to contribute to the new story. With that, I'm Chris Martinson. I will see you next week.